Okay, positions, everybody. We're ready for a take.
It's been about 5 years now since the last installment I did on how to build Hoerner-style wingtips for an experimental aircraft out of foam. Part of it was because I simply didn't have time to edit the video I had shot, and part of it was because the way I built the foam cores last time didn't exactly work out the way I had hoped. Part of the way I used the hot wire to cut the foam destroyed the trailing edges, which I had to rebuild in the process. Recently I started making foam cores for a cassette project I was working on and decided to go back and cut another set of cores for another Sonorai project that I am working on. I decided to do a 1-hour live webcast, and that's what you're about to see. It was done with a live audience and a cameraman to help move the camera around. It's not polished, it's not perfect, but I hope you get something out of it. The latest way I've come up with cutting these seems to be working pretty well. I made this tip this afternoon very quickly. So here's the standard Sonorai airfoil. This tip is actually a little bit bigger than, this is actually 2 inches bigger, so this is a 12-inch span tip right now. The reason I did that is I'm getting ready to finish these tips up like this, and then I want to put, I'm going to make female molds for these, and then I'm going to try and make tips out of it. We'll see how that goes. If that goes okay, then what I'm thinking about doing is making these wet tips. And just by taking a look at it, I figure I can get at least maybe 3 or 4 gallons of fuel in this. As you guys all know, I'm always trying to find some other place to stick fuel in the Sonorai that doesn't affect the weight and balance so much. So these tips would be great if I can get that to work. So the tip, as you see it here, I've done some sanding to it. I put a little bit of filler on it. Like I said, Jeff and I just set up today and tried a couple of these new techniques that I used on the cassette tip and to see if they would work. Now, it seems to work out pretty well. The big difference between these tips, notice this is a constant cord tip other than this taper at the front. I'll talk about how I laid the taper out and then how I sanded this, and a little bit of it's artistry, but I tried to keep it as straightforward as by the numbers as possible. The cassette tip's a little bit different. It's shaped. It is a modified Hoerner wingtip, just like the other ones. As you can see, this is the top-down view. This is the side view of it, so you can see that it both tapers in both directions at the same time. This one's a little bit more complicated to cut. Not only do you have to have the airfoil shape itself, you also have to have this shape, and then there's a series of cuts that you have to go through to get to this. This isn't that much harder, but for this I figured I wanted to make some new Sonorai tips anyway. Jeff, you want to just zoom up on, I've got this 2-place Sonorai it's hanging up above my head here that I originally picked up because I want to take my kids flying. Now that's got the standard wingtips on it, so I'm going to make a set that hold fuel for that. Now this is the standard Sonorai tip here. This is just a fiberglass one, and you can see at the tail it's cut for the counterweight. I'm not a terribly big fan of the way the counterweight works on my Sonorai now, but as you can see, what I did was I replicated the Sonorai airfoil onto this. Now, if you guys watch those form block videos and stuff about how I did the first one, obviously I'm a little younger there. That was 2007, so I'm a little older, a little grayer now, and hopefully a little wiser, but my wife doesn't think so. So anyway, I'll shut up and get into this. I'm going to set the cassette tip aside, get rid of the Sonorai tip. And what I guess I'll do first is run through a couple of the tools I'm using here. The biggest key is this thing here called the hot wire. Now this is Jeff, I think, is going to zoom up here a little bit so you can see a little bit more. If you look closely, this thing, wow, that is excessive zoom. Okay, I'll move this over there a little bit. So you can see all this thing is a piece of wood and an aluminum arrow shaft. Okay, and it's replicated on the other side as well. And then this is some speaker wire. And I like this speaker wire a lot because I just kind of twist it around here, and then I can change the temperature and shorten how much of the wire is heating. This wire, I just bought this. You can usually buy it at hobby shops. It's called Nichrome Wire, or nickel chromium wire. You usually pay $3 or $4 for a little small piece of it that's usually about 8 thousandths. This one here I'm using is 20 thousandths. I hadn't used it before today. I bought it off of Amazon. I bought like a 4-ounce spool of it for $15, and there's no way I'll go through that in my entire lifetime. So, common question I hear about, or people ask when I talk about the tips, is how did it change the way the airplane handles? And I always point out that I cut 8 inches off of each wing before I did the tip. Now, if you measure the airplane tip to tip, it's still the same as it was before I cut it because my tips make up the extra distance, but they're not airfoil all the way out to the end. The best way I can describe the way it changed, I don't really know if it made it faster because I painted it at the same time and did a bunch of different things. So I'm not really sure. The one thing that is very noticeable about it is when it had the round tips on it, I almost always wheel landed it because it seemed to come in when you were flaring. If you got the nose a little too high or you just got a little too slow, it seemed to give up, kind of like a Tailorcraft gives up or the short-wing Pipers give up. When you're getting the flare and all of a sudden you just forget it, I'm not flying anymore, and then you drop. With these tips, landing is almost a complete non-event. In fact, I rarely ever wheel land it anymore. I almost always three-point it. I posted a picture not too long ago where I was landing and I got the tail really low. I mean, I think the tail wheel tapped the ground and my mains were probably still 8 to 10 inches off. The thing that it really changes when you're coming into land, really all you do is you kind of just sit there and wait, and it will just float itself down on rather than all of a sudden giving up and hitting the ground really hard. So that's what I've noticed is the biggest thing. Now, people ask about should I make the wingtip shorter? You know, what am I doing? If you add more wingtip or more span, plus you're adding a more efficient tip, you're loading the wing differently. And just as Khan's comment is about the spin recoveries, you're all in test phase. Mine worked. I know how my wings act. If you put a 10 or 12-inch tip on your stock Sonorai 2 wings, I really don't know what's going to happen. I would guess that I wouldn't be pulling a lot of G's with it, or as many as you're used to. One thing I should point out about this, I don't know if I did, this is actually wider. This is a 12-inch tip. The ones that are on mine are 10. And the reason, like I said, I did that is so I could get a little more fuel capacity in them. At first, I was going to make them 4 inches this way, so it even got more fuel in it, but I'm glad I didn't at this point because if this works and it doesn't cause a big problem, then maybe I'll add more fuel capacity. But it's all experimental at this point. So yeah, the hot wire is pretty simple. On the ground here, I've got a 12-volt battery charger just sitting down by my feet. It's a run-of-the-mill variety. With this 20 thousandths wire, it takes 10 amps to run the wire that long. So I'll kick this thing in and out. For shaping foam, a rasp is always very handy for rough work. Here's the spool of Nichrome wire. There's no way I'm ever going to use all that. Just a sanding block made out of a piece of steel with a thing, then a finer block. And other than a drill and a couple other things, it's pretty straightforward. So I'll set this one aside. I've got my block set up already from earlier. I'm going to disconnect from the mic here real quick and go get the block. Basically picking up where I left off 5 years ago. One thing that I did differently now, it saved me a ton of time, was rather than going through the hassle of measuring to get these blocks on here the same, I take it you guys all watched that old video. So basically you can see here the blocks are on either side. I went through this big rigmarole of measuring before. To do it this time, I just stuck a couple of wood blocks under a flat surface and measured it off and got everything the same. I mean, you can literally get these blocks on here with a couple of screws in minutes now. So that's enough of me yakking. Tell you what I'll do. I'm going to fire up the hot wire and make the first cut here. Jeff has got some mobility with the camera, so I'll show you what we're doing here. I'll try and do it about like this. And what I'm going to do with it first is I'm actually going to flip it over and cut the bottom first, because I always do the bottom of everything first, because if you screw it up, it's on the bottom and hardly anybody will ever see it. In this case, you're cutting almost all the bottom off anyway, so it doesn't matter. First thing I like to do, I'm going to fire up the hot wire here. It's down by my foot. Couple notes about the hot wire. You don't want that thing to be glowing. You can see it, maybe, I'm not sure if the resolution is good enough, but you can see it getting hot and burning the old styrofoam off of it. So you don't want that orange. One of the keys to being successful with a hot wire is you want to go slow and cool as possible. So it's hot, but it's not orange. And by the way, don't try a guitar string because that won't work. I know that because I tried it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is bring my hot wire down onto the wood. And I'm just going to cut off the front first. So let the wire go down in there and then begin dragging it along the form block. Try and keep it straight on both sides. And then I'm just going to pull it out here. And I mean, that's the basic idea that we're going to do here, is go through and cut like that. Go ahead and just get the front here, Jeff. You can see the wire is still smoking from that there. One thing, especially for you guys that are overseas, I don't know what kind of foam exactly they're using. Be careful, though, because some of the urethane-based foams will kill you if you inhale that stuff. This styrofoam stinks bad, but it won't kill you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the rest of this thing back. And again, this is the bottom of the airfoil. Don't be in a big hurry. Let the wire and the tool do the work. I'm barely pulling any tension on it. I just don't want it to float up. So this is where it'd be nice if it were just a video and you wouldn't have to sit around for the wire to cut the whole thing, because I'm sure you guys get the idea at this point. But I'll continue to pull it through. Notice the wire kerf. You can see that one of the problems that happens is if you get the wire too hot, then that kerf, or like the saw cut kerf, but a wire kerf in this case, gets really wide, and you end up deforming the shape of the foam. The wire's sagging a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal because I'm cutting straight across. If you're doing complex shapes where, let's say, the root of it is different than the tip of it, then there's a whole nother thing you got to go through as far as numbering, and then it's absolutely a two-person job. But for this straight across like this, the wire does not sag at all. It's just riding on both of the form blocks on both sides. You'll see in a second when I pull it out of the back. Nothing terribly fast about it, but it's efficient and it works. All right. Jeff, our cameraman, has been out here helping me work on my sonar eye and build some cassette stuff. He's very good at it. I hand him a piece of metal and he comes back with the thing I was hoping it would look like. So he's helping me with the camera tonight. No experience, but he's very good at figuring things out and building things. So there we go. The wire comes out the back. I'm going to shut the wire off here quick. If you want to zoom out, Jeff, then basically it's cut. I mean, you lift it off and your shape is there. So I'm going to throw this to the side. You do have a little bit of funky stuff on here. I'll just brush off. You can see it. It's like blue hair. Of course, that's no reference to old ladies. It's literally blue. Take a look at it, and you can see the cut's actually really nice. There was a little spot on the back here. Little note, I let the wire get up off the wood a little bit. Jeff, if you can zoom in on that, you might be able to see it. If you do something like this, resist the urge to take the wire and run it back across, because then it actually makes a divot on either side of it. So this is what you'll use. Like, let's see if I can. I'll leave my mic for a second. cause more harm than help doing that. Again, one thing about the block, you'll see when I get it all cut out here, it's pretty ugly until you start sanding it, but it doesn't take hardly anything to get it to looking really nice. So I'm going to go a bit back over here now and flip it. That side's cut to the airfoil. I'm going to do the same process here. Fire the wire up. I'm going to go here in the front. Wait till I can see it's hot. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to cut down to the blocks and then just go forward. Try and keep it straight, both sides straight across. Otherwise, you get like this skewed shape. So, front block is off. I'm just going to go back through the boring process of letting it cut the other side. You can see there's really not a whole lot to it once you get it set up. The real trick is cutting the shape on the underside. That is the one that has, first time I did it, I didn't like the way it worked out because it destroyed the back of the airfoil, or the back of the tip, and I had to rebuild them both with fiberglass, and I figured out a way that I don't have to do that. I got a 12-volt battery charger on the floor set at a 10-amp setting, just underneath my feet there. I should have worked up like a musical number or something I could have sang while we waited. One other thing that is different about what I've done here than the old video is that if you notice, my blocks are glued together horizontally rather than vertically like the pink ones I did with the other one. I did that because it just gives it a nicer and cleaner shape for the most part. The other problem is when I did the other tips, I did it and it was like near 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and when it got out in the sun, they post-cured a little bit and they moved around. So that's definitely a suggestion. I guess we could do a whole thing on how to fiberglass these things later. But they definitely should be post-cured. More Jeff Beck, yeah. Is that Pete? I should have known it was Pete. Pete, Jeff, who's running the camera, is my drum mentor, by the way, since I've been playing drums lately. Jeff Pete is a very good bass player. Okay, so there we go. See all the blue hair hanging off there. Again, if you look right here, you can see this is where I transition between two pieces of foam. I just used like a Scotch 77 adhesive, so there are a couple of transitions. Don't worry about that stuff. We'll fill all that out and it'll look fine later. Be careful, I had never run into a foam before that ate, or a spray adhesive that ate the foam, but if you look here at this cassette tip in the back, I think Jeff will zoom in, I used a different adhesive thinking that they were all the same, and they're not. You can see where those things went through, that it kind of ate into it, which is not a big deal. I can fill that, but it's just kind of annoying to have to do. Just stick with the 3M Scotch 77 foam. I've got a can of it I'll grab later. So the basic airfoil shape is cut. What I do at this point is grab my block, just look around, see if there's anything that doesn't look all that hot. I'm sure that's an annoying sound through the microphone. Just a couple of those boogers like before. I'm just smoothing them out. I'm not going to worry about the trailing edge. It's kind of hanging over there and it's all ratty. You got to build that up with filler anyway in the long run. So it's just easy to do this now. you can see that, like I said, just with this is 40 grit paper adhesive made for like a board, or a pneumatic board file, or air straight line sander. You can see that my block here has taken some abuse from sitting around for the last 5 years. So what I'll do is I'll just pull the screws now. These are the same form blocks that I made in the other video. The nice thing is you can see how fast you can fire out a airfoil shape like this. You can just play around with all kinds of different shapes. I mean, now we've got the airfoil. You know, it's the exact shape of the Sonnerai airfoil at this point. Thank you, Jeff. So now is where I gotta do a little thinking and make sure I don't cut two of the same side of wingtip. So I'm gonna find my other one because I can't remember which side that was. So this appears to be a left wingtip. So now I need to make this into a right wingtip. And don't get your airfoil upside down, your plane will fly funny, to say the least. So, you know, spend some time thinking about this. You know, which side needs what. So, okay, two things exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be my root. Okay, this side here is my root. So what I'm going to do, keep your thumb on it so you don't forget which side it is. This is my root. Now the first thing I'm going to do there, I'm not going to let this get far away because I'm going to double check against that to make sure I'm not doing something stupid, which is entirely possible. This is like the only big change from the other video that I didn't ever post. Which side did I say was the root? This side here. So this would be the right airfoil. This is the big change. In the original one, I see the camera's doing a little goofiness. You want to check that cable, make sure it's not falling off the side. No, on the back, on the side there. Don't pull it out, but yeah, there you go. Okay, sorry about that. We'll have to keep going. Originally, when I did these, this is just aluminum tape that comes in a roll. This is 2 inches. Originally, when I did this, I cut this out of aluminum, and it was kind of a pain, not for this part as much. So what I'm going to do here is turn this around here so I can work with it. And I'm just going to stick this on the bottom here, right along this edge. You can kind of see it like that. I'm going to run it right along there. I'm going to run it from the back because I'm right-handed. So I'm going to go right to the edge. And be careful to get it, you know, keep it right to the edge here. So this is giving me something to cut from, and you'll see in a second how that works. Now this is really where how you put this tape on is going to determine the airfoil and everything about the tip. And you can do lots of different shapes with the foil tape and come up with all different kinds of airfoils and different tip shapes too. The reason that I went with the modified Hoerner for the cassette as well is because cassettes have a reputation of having a relatively high stall speed, and I'm not really interested in landing in a hayfield around here at 90 miles an hour. So I want to try and get the stall speed down as much as I can. I'm probably sacrificing some top end, but I've got a wife and kids to worry about. So I'm just running the tape across here nicely, and when I get to the end, I'm just going to tear it off. I'll put it down real nice, and you can see it's just a piece of tape across it. Now, make sure it's got good adhesion throughout. I'm just going to tear this so it doesn't get in my way. The tricky part now comes on the other side. So this is my root, and this is going to be the outboard of my airfoil. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to stand around and look for Sharpie for a while, unless Jeff grabs that one and throws it to me. That one over there, right behind you. tried to prepare, but I wasn't exactly prepared. Okay, so again, I'm going to think about this so I don't do something dumb. What I want to do here, this is not scientific at all. I'm going to just take this Sharpie and I'm going to draw roughly a quarter-inch line along the top of it here. As a reference. I'm going to bring that all the way along the airfoil here. All the way to the front. Okay, so you can see there, I've got that black reference line right across there. And what I'm going to do here now is use some more aluminum tape, but now Jeff's cut it in half for me to half the thickness. And the reason is I can get this tape now to go around the airfoil by bending it slightly. Actually, I need to turn it back around. I don't know, Jeff, if you can get in any closer. I'm going to just run this around roughly to the middle of that line. Now sometimes I'm going to have to break it, tear it, because it's not going to make the turn. Once I get out of this real sharp section of the airfoil, it'll make the turn much nicer. So I'm just going to keep ripping it off here a little bit. This front part here is going to get completely thrown away anyway, so it's not critical. You'll see why. So I'm going to run around that line. I think I can start to get the tape to bend a little bit. Try and keep the inside edge here smooth because you're going to be cutting against that. I'm getting a little messed up there, so I'm going to break that off again. And start in. This is much like doing body work tape. You know, you just be very accurate and take your time. Let the tape bend a little bit as you go around a corner. Helpful to take the backing off the tape like I am in little pieces rather than getting it stuck to itself too. So let's see if I can get this to go around that corner. It did. Now I'm home free on the back of the airfoil. Again, this isn't super critical. It does affect the whole cut of everything, but as far as this top edge goes, you're going to be sanding that anyway. So it's not going to be exactly how you cut it with the wire anyway. This is a potential problem spot here. I can see a piece of foam sticking up a little bit. We'll see how we cut around that, how that works out. The other thing is, you know, I talked about if there's something sticking up, don't put the wire back in there and try and recut it. If there's a divot or something in there, there's a way to fill that. And I'll show you probably what I found the easiest way of going about that too is. There are other methods, I'm sure, but the one that I use, I'll show you. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to go around the top here, make sure that edge is taped as nice as I can, and I'm going to bend the foil down as well, wrap it around the back here, just so it doesn't get in my way. You could do this with a form block, a piece of wood, on a sonorai tip, but on the way the casset tip is, there's really no other way of cutting it with the wire, because you couldn't really make a form block that would follow a tip that's cut in two directions. So now what I've set up here is a cut line for the wire on this side and a cut line for the wire on this side. Now as I go across here, because it is just thin tape, it's not going to give us the most beautiful cut. However, it's more than functional, as you'll see. So I'm going to go about this in sections rather than big chunks like I did before. I think, Jeff, I don't know if you can come over to the side here a little bit more. Gonna turn the power on the wire. I'm going to go at this in chunks rather than a full a cross cut. I'll wait till Jeff can get repositioned here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plunge into the foam here. If I can get it this way a little bit so you can actually see what I'm fighting with. Sorry to put my back to the camera, but as you can see here now, I'm going to just try and sink this in. I'm only going to try and do chunks at a time here. So I'm going to take the wire in and try and time it so I get down to both pieces of aluminum tape at the same time. So I've got it there, and I've got it here. So now I'm just pulling it gently and letting the tape guide the wire. Like I said, this front's a good place to start because all of this is going to get thrown away anyway when we do the rest of the radius and everything. So I'm going to keep going at this in chunks like that. I'm going to grab a block. It's not rocking on me. So here we go again. I'll take a little bit more this time. Again, don't push the wire, just let it do its thing. So they're both on the tape, and I'm going to start pulling forward gently, keeping an eye on both sides to make sure that the wire is still against the tape. The cassette tip is different in the sense that it tapers the two pieces of tape at each other. So if you decide to do a tapered foil or a thing like that, make sure the two pieces of tape don't cut each other, because if you hit both at the same time, as soon as you touch it down there, you'll melt your wire in half because it shortened the distance dramatically in the resistance. And again, sorry, this part's kind of boring while we cut it. It's surprisingly resilient to having it buried in there. You can't go pushing on it like crazy, but it's surprisingly resilient to the wire being buried in it. Again, let the wire do the work. If you're pushing real hard, then you increase the chances of it doing that. Again, you can see the layers of the foam here. Let me get my block back. Yeah, what's it doing? What's it saying? Okay, I'm gonna leave it alone. Is it back? Is it working? Hey guys, sorry about that. In all Jeff's years of schooling on the camera, he accidentally hit the button. He hit the suck button. Sure, you guys are getting the idea here. I really could, I guess, go to the back and try and work toward the front, but working in chunks like this, if I get in trouble, it buries one of the wires into a piece of tape or anything, it's just easier. I don't have enough experience doing it this way yet to really know what not to do, so I'm taking it in chunks. This is only the third time I've used the tape method. And you can slowly see an airfoil or Hoerner shape emerging here. Jeff and I are both very high on styrofoam fumes, so if we start getting funny, that's why. Yeah, one thing about burying the wire into the tape, make sure the tape is stuck really well to the foam, because the adhesive on the back of the tape connected to the foam actually makes a pretty stiff cutting line. See, I got a little up out of there because I was about to hit the table. That one's a little long. I don't really want to sand all that out. I'm going to try. You're going to see how this wire burns in a little more than I want it to, but that's pretty big, so I'm going to try it. So it worked out, but these divots here are the things I try and avoid doing. You can see a little bit too, the block the adhesive on the blocks isn't holding all that well on one of those. We'll deal with that in a bit. Whew. Nope. The radius on the front is still all done by the numbers. So Pete, you'll have to come back and watch the rest of it. We'll be actually be doing that radius here in just a minute anyway. See, like this here, it got a little higher up. I'm not going to try and cut that. I'm not going to try and mess with the wire on that. I'm going to come back and do that with the sander. See, it went right through the tape that time because it wasn't paying attention. Let's see what kind of damage we did. So it ate into that. I'm going to have to do some filling on that to make that work out now. Still not the end of the world. Although it got pretty thin there. Go this way with this one. Like I said, when it first comes out like this, it does look pretty ugly. I got to get back over here and shut my wire off. There's what it looks like at this point. They've still got the radius to do. So what I'm going to do is carefully start pulling the tape. Be careful when it's real thin like this. It's easy to pull big chunks of foam with it, with the tape. Don't worry too much about the front though, because that's getting cut off anyway in a second. See on the back there, I got a little hyperactive, but don't worry about this. All this has got to be. You're going to sand this out a little bit anyway, and the real shape that's going to be out here is going to be done with fiberglass and filler anyway. Just trying to get the rest of the tape off of here. There we go. So that's what we've got now. We've got a Sonnerai airfoil on one side, and then we've got the Hoerner, modified Hoerner shape. Now what we've got to deal with is the front here. So at this point, it's been less than half an hour of cutting time. So what I'm going to do here is got this wire that I've cut to be the depth of the tip. And what I want to do is set this up so I can cut a radius here. Pull that tape back there. So I'm just going to mess around a little bit until I find the place to plunge this wire in. You see, I'm trying to get right up to the tip, and I'm going to, now that looks close enough for government work. So now I'm going to take my Sharpie or sharp instrument or whatever. This is a piece of safety wire, by the way. It could be string or whatever. And then I'm going to just draw this around, a cut line around. And this Sharpie is actually not even drawing. It's just simply cutting a groove in it. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay, that's why it was going off. That wasn't helpful either. By the way, I sharpened the other side of the pin. If you try and just stick a piece of welding rod in there, it's going to tear the foam up pretty good. So I sharpen it like you'd sharpen a tungsten electrode, which is you sharpen it with the grain. So if the wheel is running like this, you're sharpening this way or that way, not this way. Otherwise, it doesn't go in very well. So now you see I've got a shape there. Heat my wire back up. And what I'm going to do is just kind of go at this gently. I'm just keeping the wire straight up and down, and I'm taking gentle cuts here, just tacking pieces off a little bit as I go. And eventually I'm going to get closer and closer to that line. Don't want to get too close. I'm going to probably stay a 1/4 inch away and use the rasp to get me the rest of the way. That's the only freehanding really of the wire that you're going to end up doing. Relatively difficult to cut anything straight. So now you can see the rough radius here. So now we've got the radius on the top, or the first radius. There's actually 2 to get this to come out like I've done them. Problem is now is look at, you've got this blunt edge here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to come back, use the rasp. And there you can really see. So, oh, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to forego just drawing that on there. So what I'm going to start doing here is going across. I'm not left-handed, so this is kind of hard to do this one from this direction. I'm going to have to go here. And I'm just starting to blend the airfoil out. The problem is you don't want the air to have to go through this, go down before it comes back up. So I'm trying to get the air entry so it goes right in and stays along the tip rather than going down to this with that bump. And then this here you'll blend. Experiencing technical difficulties. Try it this way. Start blending with something not as aggressive as the rasp, because now you're starting to look at the shape. How is this really blending? So now you can see that you're getting an airfoil shape, and it's just blended, basically. Now, the other thing I did with this, on the other tip, I'll show you quickly. I'll actually draw it out on here. I don't know if I need to measure all that. For the sake of brevity, I'll show you on this other tip. What I actually did is, you see how this tip has a more gentle radius here now, and this is still just the rounded radius. What I did is I went 16 inches back into the Sonnerai airfoil, because that's about the peak of the airfoil where it starts causing the air to go the wrong direction. 16 inches back, then I drew a line, came in this direction 9 inches, and then I went straight over, and I literally cut it straight from there to where that is. Okay, and then from there, that's really the only thing left to do by eye. Is I just took the sander and I blended that straight line into a nice curve. So there's a lot of different. That's what those marks are there for, just as reference marks, so I can see what I'm doing. So what I'll do with this one eventually is, like I said, I'll lay it out 9 inches. I'll go forward 9. Cut this straight across, and then just by eye blend it until the radius is like that. Now this is nice. If Jeff aims right at that, you can see that the air doesn't have to make a sharp turn at the front of the airfoil. It simply goes right underneath. Okay. What I've done from there to clean this up further is my foam is coming apart a little bit here, so I might have to use some pins in there. But then I just go across it. I'm sure this is really nice sounding through the mic. I just sand across it. And start blending all of that. Pull off your 2-inch here. You can see you've got a real sharp edge there, and then just go across. Ooh. As you can see, it's just blending in that way. Then when I get back to this mess here, that's kind of deep, but I'm not really concerned about that. Just go over it. Get it pretty close. All of these, typically I would take all the time now and, sand all this so this looks really nice. The only other thing besides cut the front there and sand that like I did on this one is I use a little bit of filler on this, and there's a model airplane trick I'll show you quickly. Let me just sand this a little nicer here. Typically I'd go after this now with a lighter grit sandpaper. The best way that I've found to go about filling imperfections like this that I created on the back from the wire diving into the aluminum there, tape, is this is lightweight spackling compound. In the US, you should be able to buy this at Home Depot or Lowe's or any home improvement store. It's simply the stuff that you would use on sheetrock. Overseas, I'm sure you're going to find lightweight putties like that. It's essentially marshmallowy. It's sticky. It's not the heavy kind of filler. The thing to do with this, though, is get a little bit of water. It's water soluble. Dump some water in with it and mix it up. It becomes like a really nice slurry, actually. So now it's very watery. Mix it nice. And then what you can do with a scraper then is come across here like this. And then all that ugly stuff that's there ends up getting filled with this compound. And it might need a couple of coats of this. But go across it, and you can see, and even I'll take a crack at this big deep one back here. I would typically use something a little muddier for that, if you will, or thicker. But even that is not a showstopper. So don't worry too much about your foam core being perfect. You can fill it like this anyway, pretty easily. Now that's going to take a couple of coats to get really nice. Yeah, but there you have it. I mean, the divot there is essentially gone. It needs to be dressed properly. But, don't worry too much about your cores. I mean, with another 10 minutes of messing around, this core would look exactly like the other one. So, pretty easy. And that takes it through how to get the cores made for your wingtips. So I guess at that point we've been really doing this for about 40 minutes now. So it goes pretty quickly once you get set up and get going with it. Do you guys have any questions at this point? Yeah, what I'll typically do with this is let the stuff set up and get dry, and then sand it, and then fill and sand and everything. Now, what I'll eventually do is use this filler and get it pretty much so the whole thing's got a thin coat on it, and then I'll sand it out with 150 or 200 grit sandpaper right before you get ready to put the fiberglass onto it. In this case, these are going to be covered, and they'll end up being cores for female molds. So the ones on my Sonorai, which were only 10 inches and not 12 like these, were 1.4 pounds. And the reason I waited is because I was trying to evaluate the value of leaving the core in or taking it out. So what I ended up doing is I took out the first 4 inches because it was very strong, but I left all the foam in the rest of it just because I probably picked up an extra 2 pounds in doing it that way in the whole airframe. But I mean, you'd have to if you hit the tip with a hammer, it would the hammer would bounce off of it. It's very tough like that. So I gave up some weight to make the tip really tough. Not the way that I put them on before. If you guys watched the previous video, you see that I made a 25 thousandths lip that was, I believe, 1 inch long all the way around. Then what I did with it, and that is probably where I should pick up the next video after this, because everything I did from there on out is the way I do it again. So you've got this lip of 25 thousandths. This core actually slides inside of that. And then what I did was I put mold release on the whole thing and fiberglassed right over the 25 thousandths aluminum, then cut it off so it was the same shape as this. And then I did a zigzag rivet pattern back and forth on 1 inch spacing back and forth. So I believe that would easily carry the weight of 30 pounds of fuel out there, or whatever it ends up being. If I can get 3 gallons in each one of these tips, I'll be happy. That's 6 total. You're talking 18 pounds. It's not insignificant. I would do some, if you're considering putting fuel out there, definitely do some reading on tip tanks, because there are a lot of things to think about. Like Hans said, you've got that weight out there, so it's harder to pull out of a spin. There's a lot of other things about tip tanks to consider. The nice thing about tip tanks is they don't stress the wing is the same way as fuel inside the fuselage, because the wings have to carry that weight to the spar root. With fuel at the tip, however, it's causing different stresses on the wing by having to carry the fuel out there. Especially on a hard landing. If you get a lot of fuel out there and you have a hard landing, then you've got all of that negative bending on the wing as well. Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't gone really far into thinking about that, other than it definitely has to have a vent, and it would be probably a good idea to have the vent facing into the airstream. There are a whole bunch of things to think about, just like the standard Sonorai fuel system. My first inclination would be, let me grab the better tip here. My first inclination would be to probably try and run the vent to the front of the airfoil here. But then I really have to think through, because the problem with a vent line like that is the same with the Sonorai airframe, is if you put it in wrong, you could set yourself up for a siphon that actually creates negative pressure on your fuel system and your engine quits on you. This isn't a great idea. For cruise flight, if you're just flying around, the wingtips are probably high enough up above the carburetor, if you've got a low mounted carb, to gravity feed them. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, those are all things. Every single thing like that needs to be flow tested on the ground. It needs to be very, very carefully analyzed and tested. Yeah. Like, I've just used fiberglass out there. Two layers of my tips, since I left the foam in there, I only used 2 layers of fairly heavy cloth on it. But there are some tricks to fiberglassing this. You've got a fiberglass, and this is all I can do in a different session, is this tip needs to be wrapped in a bias cloth, and then you've got to lay things in different directions to get it to all work. Otherwise, it won't stay down.